information will be stored what? Splunk store what in which subfolder, subdirectories. So this is the reason this is called a Splunk directory structure. Okay. So you know what? Under etc means under etc directory. First of all, let's understand etc. Then we understand all other. So most important to understand. Most important is this for you from admin perspective, because most of the time you will make the changes here. But however, we are going to understand everything. But first of all, you this etc is the directory where Splunk will store all its configuration. All its configuration will be stored under the etc directory. It is a directory, not a file. It's a directory right now. It's a folder, right? Call it directory. It will be stored all the configuration. You know, under etc, there are again subdirectories. Different pen use करते हैं. There are few more, but I'm writing important. Important is Splunk store what in which subfolder, subdirectories. Is either searchhead, indexer, or anything, or Splunk Enterprise.
Okay.
So I'm just telling you, it will get installed under C drive, program file, or maybe any drive. So Splunk folder will be created. So in a Splunk folder, there will be many subdirectory. We call it subfolder or subdirectory, you can tell, right? So what are different subdirectory and what information will be stored? But it is so important for us from admin perspective, because we added those information. We should know where the configuration are being stored, what information is being stored where, being an admin. Okay, so we are understanding which information will be stored what. Splunk store what in which subfolder, subdirectories. So this is the reason this is called a Splunk directory structure. Okay, so you know what? Under etc means under etc directory. First of all, let's understand etc. Then we understand all other. So most important to understand. Most important is this for you from admin perspective, because most of the time you will make the changes here. But however, we are going to understand everything. But first of all, you this etc is the directory where Splunk will store all its configuration. All its configuration will be stored under the etc directory. It is a directory, not a file. It's a directory right now. It's a folder, right? Call it directory. It will be stored all the configuration. You know, under etc, there are again subdirectories. Different pen use करते हैं. There are few more, but I'm writing important. Important is apps, user.
Total, how many will be there, sir?
Apps, user, and system. See, there are other files also, but I'm talking about the files which are important, which we generally change. Okay. So under that you have apps, system, and users. App, system, and what? Users. Under system, you will have again two folders, means two directories. Default and local. What we have? Understand, right? What is written? What is written, you understand, right? Default and local. Now I'll explain you. Everybody written?
Yes, sir.
You know what? Under default folder, so let me tell you one thing. First of all, like you understand, Splunk do not store all the logs under single storage, right? Splunk use the concept of indexes. Most of like Sentinel use the concept of tables. Instead of indexes, Sentinel use tables, security tables. Windows log will store under security tables, Windows security tables. Firewall log and common security, common event format tables, common security logs table. So different just to make the faster. Like we define indexes here in the Sentinel, we define table, which table you want to search, right? To make the search faster, right? So we understand in Splunk we use indexes to store different flows, so that searching will be faster, right? If we store all the Sanu, you have any question?
No, sir,
Can
my
you
Zoom
mute
is
my,
getting
please?
unmute. I'm so sorry.
This is really unacceptable.
Sir, it's some issue with the app. Sorry, I'll rejoin. Okay.
You forgot actually. No issue. You forgot to mute.
No, sir, I just also got kicked out of the meeting, so it's some issue
Kicked
with
out,
the
but
Zoom
once you
application.
rejoin, then you keep your mic on mute. See the mic actually. You know that it is
Sorry,
very
sorry, guys.
important, right? So what I'm saying, because I feel like you're asking question. If noise is being created, I feel like somebody is trying to interrupt, somebody is trying to ask question. That's interruption. So what I'm saying is Splunk use the concept of indexing so that searching will be faster. Different logs on different indexes. As I said, Splunk has Splunk has a lot of configuration changes option, highly customizable tool, lot of configuration changes. You can see just for indexes, 100 different options you have to make the configuration changes. Just for indexes. If you talk about other configuration, so many configuration. Means if you as I said, Splunk will be storing its configuration on the configuration file, that is notepad kind of file. Notepad kind of file, right? So you understand, if Splunk store all the configuration under one particular notepad kind of file, that we call .conf file, the file will become this much big. Yes or no? This much big. Now you want to make certain changes in this big file, you'll have to find out which configuration I want to change, where is that? Yes or no? And second thing is, if you make any mistake, the whole configuration will be gone, whole configuration will be lost, nothing will work. That is the second challenge. Are you getting a point?
Yes, sir.
If a Splunk will store all the configuration in a single file, it will be challenge, right, while making the changes. And if you make any mistake, if file has a problem, it will impact the whole configuration. And Splunk will become unstable. So what Splunk does? Splunk do not store the whole configuration of the Splunk under single file. Inside a single file, it creates multiple configuration of files. Based on what you are configuring, it will create different files. For example, when you configure input, means when you integrate devices. For example, it's a heavy forwarder. When you configure input, right, for end devices. यहाँ देखो. When you configure input, right, to receive the logs, receiving, right? So whatever device you are receiving the logs, you configure input. Those Windows or Linux, whatever, those configuration, what you configure to receive the logs, those configuration will be recorded in another file. That file is called as inputs.conf. What? Inputs.conf. So whenever you want to make any changes regarding integration of devices, directly you can go on the file called as inputs.conf. Whenever you are forwarding the logs anywhere, for example, it's a heavy forwarder, you will forward the logs to indexer. So indexer IP address, port number, or related configuration will be stored on the file called as what? Outputs.conf. Whenever you create any indexes or you have default indexes also, indexes related settings will be stored under the file indexes index. यही है स्पेलिंग, क्या है ये? नहीं, सी नहीं आएगा. अरे indexes.conf. It will store them in the file indexes.conf. Index related setting in the indexes.conf. Understand? Splunk own related settings. For example, you want to change the port number of the Splunk, you want to change, apply SSL or any settings, that will be stored under server.conf. Server.conf. dot on. Just an example I'm giving right now. So you have around 50 plus such files, configuration file for different configuration. 50 plus, around 50. You have different configuration file. 50. Splunk web related setting under web.conf. Some limitation, your session should not get logged out, password policies, limits.conf, right? So different configuration file. Some of the configuration file that we mostly change. Some of the configuration file we never change generally. That is the default configuration only. We usually do not feel that we have to change. But some of the configuration file we usually change. Are you getting what I'm saying? So you have around 50 something configuration files. The different configuration file will be stored under different. For example, I want to integrate devices or want to modify some modification. So of course, I will not change output.conf, indexes.conf, server.conf. I go on the inputs.conf. I know that I have to change the device integration settings. So I go directly to inputs.conf. I will not look at the other files. It's easy for me, right? It's a small configuration, not a big configuration. If Splunk is storing all the configuration in a bigger file, it will be a problem for you to identify. But here, all the device integration related settings only in the inputs.conf. Easy for me. Right? So it's good, right? Keeping the configuration, the different configuration files, good, right? Splunk is stored in this way only. Clear on point? Everybody is clear?
Yes. It's like segregation and segmentation we do for.
Whatever you want to understand, you can understand. But I'm explaining this way.
Yes.
Saurabh sir, I have a question.
Yes.
So, can you please tell me like what input.conf, output.conf, for example, in a definition, to change a device integration, we use input conf file, and what for others like output and indexes and servers?
For that, you'll get a documentation. We are going to use these files. So that time I will tell you some most frequently files. We'll go to edit. That time I will tell you. But if you want to check all, there is a document. You'll easily get in Google. Splunk configuration file and its explanation. Okay, that is required from admin perspective. Or if you want, I can share the document also. I share in the admin architect training. And not this perspective is not important. I share this some important document from admin perspective. What is Splunk new document करके Splunk updated document. So I think 1 minute. Splunk. Like some of the files you look. But you will get the whole document for all Splunk document for all files. अरे बहुत ज्यादा हो गया, वो नहीं हो रहा है ये, chat में नहीं जा रहा है ये. It's not going on chat actually. Small things I have just put on the chat just for you, but whole document is not going. अरे पूरा गया ही नहीं, थोड़ा सा गया है इसमें तो.
So can you share it on the WhatsApp, sir?
Okay, I will share.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyways, so you understand Splunk store different way, because we are going to use input.conf, output.conf, indexes.conf, right? That we are going to look at when we do the practicals. So you know what? This input, output, all will be where it will be stored. So you know what? When you install a Splunk, fresh Splunk, right? All the default configuration will be stored under etc, under system, under default. Whatever default configuration is coming, right? By default is Splunk. Splunk, when you install it, will have some default configuration, right? Understand? So default configuration files will be under default folder, default directory. All the limits.conf, server.conf, right? Inputs, outputs, right? So maybe inputs.conf, you have not integrated any devices, but Splunk, when it installed, right? It collects its own logs, Splunk own logs. So it will be defined under inputs.conf. So input.conf file will be there, but end devices are not integrated. Splunk own configuration is there to collect Splunk own logs. So these all files will be there under default. All whole configuration will be there in the default folder. Local folder will be usually empty. Only you have all configs under default, local folder will be empty. If you want to modify, let's say you want to integrate more devices, right? So you have option through Splunk web also, or through directly you can edit backend configuration file. You understand? There are three ways, right? Through GUI or through CLI or through web, through backend configuration file. So you can modify directly through backend configuration. You can integrate device or anything, changing settings. Even it is available on web, still you can do it through backend configuration file, because anyways, the resulting configuration is going to store on the backend configuration file only, right? You have option directly editing the backend configuration file. So what happens is, so you have all the files available in the default. If you want to modify, you can modify and save it here, but it is not recommended. If you want to modify any default, what default configuration you have, right? If you want to modify, what you do, you copy this file from here. For example, you want to modify inputs.conf, right? Or server.conf, any file. What file you want to modify means file modify means configuration you want to modify, right? You copy from here to here. Then you modify and save it here. Means you should not modify here. You can copy from here, same file input.conf or whatever you want to change, modify, paste here, and then modify and save it. Why we should not do?
So then
Because if
there
any
will be
mistake
two
happens.
files,
Cannot change the
duplicate
default.
file.
After modifying, sir, it will store.
You cannot make changes
No.
in default.
It will not. I am asking you, I am telling you that when if you want to change the configuration, you should not open and save it here, modify it and save it here. You should copy here, paste here, then modify and save it. You should not save it here. That is what I'm saying it. Getting my point? Clear what I'm saying? I'm saying
Will the
Alright.
changes reflect then?
that is what I'm saying.
Hmm.
I'm saying if you save it here, if you want to modify any file, then copy the first file default configuration here, input.conf or whatever file, then modify and save it here only, not here. I mean, that file remain here, that's not a problem, but previous default file. But new file, edited file should be here. But why this? Why we cannot save it here? If I save it here, modify and save it here, also what will happen? That's a question.
Because if you want to
It's an
change
ongoing
it,
process.
If I change it here, will it not reflect and modify the configuration? That's the question. Are you getting my point,
I
everybody?
think yep. Like once we want to do reset or something, like any changes when we want to get default, then it
Hmm.
can display the change. We have changed value, not the correct default by the original setting from Splunk.
Okay.
So it's a big tragedy in case as well.
Right. You are almost correct. Anybody else understood? But scenario understood, right? What is the challenge
Right.
here?
The default value gonna remain same. That's why we need to copy and paste it to the local, and then we should go for the changes.
Okay. Other people understanding what my question is? At least question and understanding.
Yes,
What we are
Sunil.
discussing, understanding the topic, what we are discussing right now. This is
Yes,
complete. If you're
Yes,
not
sir.
understanding,
No, we should-
do not get demotivated. This is completely admin task actually. I'm trying to make you understand. You understand, right? Because of the time we should not stick
sir.
ourselves to L1 task only, right? We should be having expertise. So that is what our objective is.
So we should never make any changes in default, sir.
Huh?
We should never make any changes in default.
We should not. If we make it, what will happen? Let's understand.
Okay.
If we make any changes, changes will happen and reflect changes. But what will happen is when we upgrade the version, when you upgrade the version, let's say it is 9.0, you want to upgrade to 9.1, right? 9.1 also will have its default configuration. This is 9.0 default configuration, right? And 9.1 also it will have a default configuration, right? So 9.1 configuration will be overwritten to 9.0 configuration. So that means what configuration changes you have done, it will be lost. Are you getting a point? If you make any change
Yes,
in the
yes.
default, during the upgrade, it will be lost because new version will have its default setting. The older version, you make the changes on default, right? It will overwritten on the new version. Means changes that you have done will be lost. New version default setting will be overwritten. Are you getting my point? Oh, that is the challenge. That is the reason you should not make any changes in default configuration, default folder. Otherwise, changes after the upgrade will be lost. If you are not upgrading, it will work fine. But if you upgrade, it will be lost. Clear our mind? Clear? So what we do? We copy it here because whatever configuration you have local, right, that will be migrated in the new version. That will remain there in the new version. So now, for example, let's say input.conf you have to modify. Copy input.conf from here to here and modify and save the input.conf file here. The changes will be migrated, means will not be lost during the upgrade. But the question will be for you, you might have this question. Now input.conf file here, there's an input.conf file. There's an input.conf file here also, and there is inputs.conf file here also. Now Splunk will get confused, right? Which configuration you should take? For example, this index in this default configuration, indexes.conf file is there. On this, we have configuration is saying 6-year retention period. On the indexes.conf file, main index is configured by default. Retention period is 6 years. But you copied indexes.conf file here, and same index main, you configure retention period is 3 years. Now you can see same file, indexes.conf file both, and same index main, but the retention period is saying 6 years here, and you change it to 2 years or 3 years. Now same file, same configuration, but same file, but different configuration, same index. So Splunk should get confused, right? I should go and implement 3 years retention period or 6 year retention period. Yes or no? You must be having this question. Now, are you able to realize?
Yes.
Are you getting a point?
Yeah,
Splunk
yes.
should get
Yes,
confused,
yes.
right? Which configuration should be implemented? Whether the file which is there on the local or whether the file which is there on the default. Would get confused. So to avoid this confusion, Splunk has defined something which called as directory precedence. What we call as directory precedence. Directory precedence. Directory precedence. Directory precedence. As per the directory precedent, only just for these two folder, whatever configuration will be there on system local will be given as first preference. System local will be first preference, and system default will be least preference, last preference. Get your mind? If you have same file, same configuration, different configuration under system local and system default, then system local will be given first preference. If file is not in a system local, then system default will take as a configuration. Clear my point? Clear?
Yes, sir.
Everybody is clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So as you said, like directory precedence will set the preferences.
Right.
So when we upgrade the version, then there will be a new by default this config files again.
Right.
So now the preferences will be to the first preferences will be to the local only, or now it again changes to default.
Precedence is always first is local and least is default. So whatever happens, always precedence is local first and
Oh,
default is least.
okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Understand? Clear? One more thing I will explain you about the apps. Apps in detail I'm not explaining you right now, but in detail I will explain you later period for what purpose we explain you. we use the apps. But you know what? Whenever we install any apps, for example, I install Windows app, for example. You know what? Whenever we integrate any device,